Well, welcome everybody to another week of House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee here in the House. It's Tuesday, January 17th. We're here this afternoon, and we're going to be hearing in our first half this afternoon a few introductions of bills that have been referred to our committee. So our first witness here is Representative John Arison, who's here to talk about H19. So welcome to House Gov.Ops and Military Affairs.
Thank you, Chair McCarthy. From my perspective, H19 is a pretty simple bill. First, I'd like to ask a question. How many of you have served either as a justice of the peace or on a select board? Okay, quite a few of you. And when you serve on either of those, you're also on the Board of Abatement. And the Board of Abatement through VSA 241535 has a fairly limited number of categories that they can abate taxes on. And the Board of Abatement is the only one that can abate taxes. The treasurer can't do it. The town manager can't do it. Only the Board of Abatement can do it. Currently, there are 8 categories: died and insolvent, moved, unable to pay. And if you've sat on those hearings, they can be very uncomfortable. Lost or destroyed property, repeal of the veterans exemption, and a mobile home that's kind of disappeared. What came up in one of our abatement hearings over the years in my town, we've been presented with a list of, for the lawyers, de minimis, another fancy word for trivial amounts. Usually it covers less than one page. Our select board has set a limit of $5, so anything under $5 has fallen on that list. And we've abated it for years and years. And all of a sudden our treasurer said it doesn't meet any of the categories. So the bill would create a category which would allow the town treasurer and accountants to actually balance the books by abating small amounts. I know in Weathersfield, population a little under 3,000, it's come out to less than $100 total. It's not worth the effort to try to collect the money. The software through Nimerick that I think just about every town uses treats every year individually, so it can't be piled onto the following year's taxes. And it certainly isn't worth going through the process of being delinquent. So anyway, it allows the accountants to clear the books up.
Representative Maury.
Yep, thank you. So just to make sure I'm crystal clear, I believe I am, but so when we do these meetings where the treasurer comes in, he'll bring those. It's a list, usually have 3 or 4 at a time.
Yep.
And they're like $96.10 or $25.06. They're very small amounts.
Ours are under $5.
Yeah, I love those all are.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that would be up to the individual town. The bill does not say this is how much it'll be.
So no.
It's up to the select board to set that level.
Okay. So the individual boards could.
Right. And usually it's set up under, they just aren't worth even making a phone call or sending a letter out.
So once they set that amount, then the treasurer would no longer have to do that process and waste the time, in essence.
That's right.
For lack of a better.
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And to be clear, Representative Arison, what you found, or at least the opinion of your local municipal officials, was that you actually can't do the practice that you had traditionally been doing of sort of writing off the de minimis amounts because there isn't actually a category to. It
would codify what a lot of towns are probably already doing. My guess is, and I not speaking for any other town, but probably a lot of towns, the treasurer's just doing it, but I don't know that. And I did run this by Ted Brady, who's the executive director of VLCT, and this certainly isn't a official position, and probably you want to hear from them on the bill. And he didn't see any problem with it.
Interesting.
Incidentally, he's Aaron Brady's husband.
Past members of former Gov.Ops committee we know Ted well.
I bet they do.
Representative Waters Evans, did you have a question? No. Well, this is a very interesting piece of policy that we may take another look at, depending on the mood of the committee and what else we have on our plate. But are there any other questions about H19 for Representative Arison? Okay, well, thank you very much for bringing.
Welcome. Thank you. I got through it without being interrupted by the drill.
Yeah, so this is, we're playing a little game of wait and see. We know that at some point this afternoon, there will be an evacuation drill for the folks back home. So we're going to see when.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Harrison. All right. So continuing our tour of 5 minutes of fame here, we're moving along very quickly, and I imagine that so that was some of these may spark more questions than others. So our next guest is Representative Larry Labor, who has H23, and Representative Labor, if you want to take the witness chair, please feel free to come on up. Welcome to House Gov.Ops and Military Affairs.
Thank you very much.
Please tell us a little bit about H23.
Well, I guess the intention of my bill was to reduce waste, and especially at the Secretary of State's office, and to improve integrity of the election voting process, and to reduce the cost of a candidate's campaign. That said, I'll take you down my road. My experience has shown that the system consists of actually 3 silos: your town clerk, USPS delivery, and Secretary of State's office. But they're 3 vertical silos. They don't necessarily cross-fertilize the information. As a consequence, there's multiple failures that are occurring, at least what I found in my campaign. For instance, in Newport City, Senator Ingalls informed me that there were over 700 ballots that were not deliverable. So, okay. I had 2 direct mails. First one was 2,600 direct mail postcards. Second one's 2,800. Out of that, I had over 500 that were listed as undeliverable, returned to my mailbox. All right. Well, I can suck up the cost of that, but that wasn't my real worry. My real worry was what was happening with the ballots. If my mail was inaccurate, based on the list that I got from the Secretary of State's office, what happens with the ballots? Well, I found out that between the 2, there were over 1,200 ballots that were undeliverable. So therein lies the questions. If you were an apartment owner and you had 4 or 5 apartments in it, because of pandemic and changes of movement of people in and out of not only that building, but our state, those ballots are either on the floor and available to the next person in. There's the genesis of the problem. Morgan, Holland, Canaan, Leamington, Island Pond, Averill, and Charleston are my areas. And I'm not even counting the 25 residents of the Gores, Averill, Warner, etc. Of the 1,200 ballots that were not delivered, mostly were due to addresses that were unknown, box numbers that never got re-rented. So therein is your cross-fertilization failure. People aren't informing other people. It's not the post office fault. It's not the Secretary of State's fault. It's not the town clerk's fault. People exited. They went to either warmer climates or job seeking, and the ones that were moving in were looking for COVID safety, buying properties. My solution to that would be do not send out the ballots to every resident or every voter. Revert back to a functioning past, which was by request. I don't care if you're a military person stationed overseas, if you're somebody of limited mobility, or someone that is just plain don't want to go to the public because of COVID. Well, we can't blame this all on COVID now. So why don't we just send out the ballots by request? You'd save a lot of grief, a lot of time, a lot of money from printing, postage for the candidate and for the Secretary of State's office. 1,200 ballots, it's expensive.
Senator Hooper.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You made a jump there that I didn't follow. Undeliverable under the post office regulations are the ones that you got back.
Yes, correct.
And then we jumped over to a bunch of them laying on the floor somewhere. What's the tie-in between?
Well, there was nobody to receive the ballot. There was nobody who received the direct mail.
So the post office delivered to a box that they should not have.
As far as they were concerned, somebody was there.
Representative Hooper Randolph.
So Representative Labor, is it true that you've just indicated that Senator Ingalls is your source of data for this?
From the Newport post office only, he inquired of the postmaster.
Okay.
I mean, Newport is what, 4,400 population? 700 is a lot. And when you inquire of the carrier, which I did in other towns, they got these 6-inch high plastic carrier boxes filled full of undeliverable mail. And they code it on the, at least on the direct mail, they code them for the reason that they couldn't deliver it. When you sort it all out, most of it was due to people gone.
Representative Wicki.
Well, it would seem to me then that the number of people voting would be diminished across
Correct.
this. Do you know what the percentage of voters compared to past?
I tried to look that up in a software package called Numenar,
Well, it's all on the Secretary of State's website.
and that's where Numenar got their information, was from the Secretary of State. And I was unable to determine the exact ratio. It's significant. That's why I'm doing this.
Representative Labor, something that occurs to me when we took up the universal vote by mail bill, which the crux of the solution to the problems you identified that's in the bill as it's introduced would be to just revert back and end the universal vote by mail for general elections that this committee in its previous form passed last year. So it occurs to me that there's a challenge in the state of Vermont around the difficulty of being able to take voters off the list that have moved and I'm wondering if one of the things that we might want to consider this year in light of our the number of undeliverable ballots is to think about having that be grounds for a challenge letter from a clerk is something I definitely would want us to put a pin in. That might solve some of the challenge. Probably wouldn't get us all the way there, but that may drastically reduce the number of undeliverable ballots in future cycles. But is that something that you looked into at all?
Yeah, I inquired of a couple of town clerks, and the word challenge is not well loved. That just puts more pressure on the town clerk to perform another duty.
I guess what I would say is that, and we'll definitely talk to clerks and treasurers if we, as we take up some elections and policy and think about this, but it seemed to me from testimony and from my local experience as somebody on the city council in city of St. Albans that there are an awful lot of folks on many of our voting rolls that no longer live in our towns.
Correct.
And that may be the fundamental thing that we want to try to address. But I agree with you that there's definitely a lot of names in some towns that are clearly not residents there anymore.
I feel that pain. I've been on the select board for 13 years.
Anyone else have questions? I saw a couple of hands. Representative Higley.
This isn't really a question. You folks may see that my name is a co-sponsor on this bill. And I was on the committee when we went down this path of passing this mailed out ballots to all registered voters. I was happy to hear the Secretary of State's office talk about how some of the issues that arose during the first effort in this mail out ballot didn't occur this year. And for members who aren't aware, just a couple of the things that I remember that I know for sure is there was St. Albans ballots that were sent to St. Johnsbury, and St. Johnsbury had to send them back to St. Albans. So again, there's, if you ask me, a real concern. And another one was my town of Eden had their postcards. Initially, we sent out a postcard, if you remember. Those were pre-addressed to go back to East Montpelier, not Eden. And I'm sure it was against, postal guidelines, but post office in Eden held them for our town clerk. So I was glad to hear that those sort of issues aren't or didn't happen. I'm not 100% convinced of that there weren't some glitches, but again, I think when you have I don't know if you could call it a third party or whatever, but a mail house that is responsible for this, there's always the chance of some issues coming up like this. And again, from my perspective, and I've always said this, that I think it's a personal responsibility of voters to, if they want a ballot, to request a ballot. I'll give you the example of my son, who still has his address as my home residence because he's floating around. He was in Colorado at the time. We received his ballot. Now it's my responsibility to make sure that he gets that ballot. And again, I think that if a voter has the responsibility and the wherewithal to vote, then he should have contacted the town clerk's office and said, this is where I am currently, please send my ballot to me. And again, I don't know how many times that arises, but to me, there is a potential for fraud there. And I guess last, and I mentioned this when we had the Secretary of State in, one of the provisions that I received in the bill that made me sign on, because I believe it was a unanimous decision in our committee, was a provision around implementing a voter verification system, or at least looking at that. It was supposed to come back in a report. You may have also remembered that there was one particular member who was looking for maybe that mailed out ballots to go to municipal elections as well as the primary. And part of this report that's supposed to come back to us is looking at what those drawbacks might be, or what the extent of support there might be out there for that. But I again have heard that this report isn't coming back, and that's a concern for me. And I hope that this bill, presenting this bill, will, create a level of questions around a lot of this, and maybe one of the suggestions that you had could be considered. I know my town clerk also doesn't like the word updating the checklist. It's they try, they do their best, but again, a lot of times they don't hear back, or if they do, it's not necessarily truthful in some senses. But anyway, that's my spiel.
Fire alarm hasn't gone off yet.
So this, correct me if I'm not understanding. This bill basically just takes us back to before the pandemic, just repealing what we did.
Well, I wasn't here for that bill, so
Well, you were
I'm not
author then, right?
but not in need of a absentee
Oh, I
ballot.
know, but I'm sure if you put this bill up, you must understand what took place in the legislature.
Absolutely,
So is that correct?
yes. Short answer to that is yes. And I haven't told you any of the anecdotal.
Oh,
I had people come to me.
I would love to hear it. And I bet my committee mates would too.
I went for coffee one morning and a lady came up to me. She says, "You're our new representative, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am." Thank you for running. I'd like to tell you a story. My son lived in 4 different addresses here in this county. He moved to Massachusetts for better economic opportunities. He moved twice while in Massachusetts. How many ballots do you think he got?
Well, I'm hoping just one, but I mean, I imagine if he was in one of the 6 locations, then he would have gotten just one
6.
to the same location.
To all 4 that were previous in Vermont and 2 in Massachusetts. He got 6 ballots.
If I could ask you a clarifying question, then Representative Lever.
Yeah.
How many ballots was he able to vote? That's really the crux of what we tried to do.
You can only vote on one. My question is, what do you do with the other 5?
So is the answer they did not get used as votes?
I have no idea.
Well,
That's my problem. The integrity of the solution is broken.
So I want to be very, very careful when we're talking about the integrity of the elections in here. And I know that there are concerns, and it's part of why I wanted to hear the presentation of this bill. But I want us all to be very, very careful about, very clear in the statements we're making on this committee about the way the security and the checks and balances that we put into voting. And the fundamental thing that was important to us on the Gov.Ops committee last biennium was to make sure that there was integrity of a voter getting checked off the checklist and the ballot being associated with that voter. That's why we ask people to sign a certification envelope. And once that voter's ballot has been voted, they can't vote anymore. So it reduces the likelihood that you're going to see somebody try to vote twice. There was one person who tried to do that to quote unquote test the system. They were found, and that, person, I believe, was charged with a misdemeanor, and that's being worked out. But I just want us as a committee to be really careful about, yes, there are always concerns, and we are concerned about the integrity of the system, but I just want to make sure that folks at home understand when we're talking about these very real and legitimate concerns, that we're also clear that there is no evidence that the universal vote by mail allowed anybody to vote multiple times, but there is a lot of evidence that we're sending out ballots to people multiple times if they had more than one address and they appear on the voter rolls in more than one place. So we're always trying to strike this balance between the accessibility and the security of the system, and where that balance should lie is definitely worth us continuing every year to have that conversation here at Gov.Ops. So with that little speech, I'll turn it back over to Representative Hooper.
Burlington.
Okay. I'm relatively pleased to hear that you got a lot of postcards back, because I would assume that indicates that the post office is actually doing its job independent of what we can mandate. They're not delivering. And I wonder if we might explore a pilot project where clearly your son, or her son, changed his address because stuff followed him. Somebody in the Secretary of State's office knew to send out ballots. Each one of those ballots, I think, has a barcode on the outside of the envelope that allows the town clerk to identify who sent it back in, so you don't get 6 check marks beside a name. I'm not sure about that, though. But I wonder if we could explore a pilot project with the post office where when they get a change of address form, they notify the Secretary of State.
Let's put a pin in that. That's definitely a good question, or maybe fire off an email to Will Senning. I believe that our vice chair, who's hanging out off-site, has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually just wanted to build off what you were talking about with the.
Matt, just real quickly, we can't hear you very well. We're going to try and increase the volume. Try now.
How's that?
Whoa, much better.
All right, I heard an echo there. Little reverb. No, I just wanted to build a little bit off of what you said, Chair McCarthy, regarding the integrity aspects. I mean, we only saw one instance of a fraudulent attempt, as you stated. and it was somebody who was actually trying to see if it worked. It worked. Yes, I get the point with the, excess ballots, the waste, etc. But what we also saw, which is what I want to point out, is we saw unprecedented voter turnout as a result of this new methodology. Excuse me, my throat's really sore. So that's just the one thing I'm not going to extend my statement at all. But I just wanted to add that with this new mechanism, we saw more people participate in an off-year election. And I believe we're close to record turnout in the previous cycle as well. So voter access is awesome.
Well, I think this was an interesting start to our truly looking at the different policy choices that we might want to think about and make in regard to the universal vote by mail and access. Just with this one short bill introduction, we've heard a broad spectrum of opinions, anecdotes from our communities, and I definitely am committed to continuing this discussion as we take up more elections policy. I really appreciate Representative Labor, you bring this bill, and Representative Higley. We haven't got it perfect, and I don't think we ever will. So this is going to be a constant evolution in what Vermonters want their elections to look like, and we'll try and do the best we can here in House Gov.Ops. So thank you very much, Representative Labor, for joining us and bringing H23 to us. And we clearly have to continue this discussion.
Thank you very much for your time.
First term.
Yes.
And who did you succeed?
Lynn Batchelor.
Lynn Batchelor.
Right. I was appointed
Yeah,
last
this is
session.
your second term, no?
Okay. So do we?
1.5.
Yeah.
A quick break. So we're just going to take a quick break. Representative Harrison, who's gets a little special dispensation since he's on the Appropriations Committee, needs a few extra minutes. So let's just take 5. So we'll go off live and back and pick